A man stands on a low wooden platform in a covered walkway in Athens, his cloak grey with the dust of the road, and he is pushing a stone cylinder along the boards with the flat of his palm. The students around him watch in silence as the cylinder rolls, gathers its own motion, and continues past the edge of his hand until it slows of its own accord and stops near the far column. He turns to them and he says that this, precisely this, is how a man is free even when he is fated. The man on the platform is Chrysippus of Soli, the third head of the Stoa, and what he has just demonstrated, with no more apparatus than a piece of dressed stone, is the answer to a problem that had broken 3 generations of philosophers before him and would occupy thinkers for 2,000 years after. The problem is this: if everything that happens has been caused by what came before, and what came before was caused by what came before that, then your choices, your assents, your refusals, your praise and your blame, your virtue and your vice are simply the latest links in a chain you did not forge. And if that is so, then it makes no sense to praise the just man or to blame the cruel one, for neither of them could have done otherwise, and the entire moral life collapses into theatre. You may already feel the weight of this problem. You have felt it perhaps in your own life when you have wondered whether you truly chose the thing you did, or whether the thing was chosen for you by the long sequence of your upbringing, your appetites, the day's weather, the words that someone happened to say at the right moment. The cylinder is Chrysippus's answer. We will spend this hour with him, and we will see what the answer is and what it is not. Let us begin with the principle itself, named plainly. The Stoics taught that the cosmos is governed by what they called the logos, a rational and providential ordering principle that pervades all things and from which nothing escapes. Every event on this view is causally determined. The wind that bends the cypress, the fever that rises in the child, the thought that surfaces in your mind as you read these words, all of them stand in a continuous web of causes that the Stoics called hymarmony, fate. Cicero, who preserves for us a great deal of what Chrysippus argued, reports the Stoic position with characteristic clarity. Fate, he writes, is the eternal cause of things, by which past events have happened, present events are happening, and future events will happen. Against this teaching, an objection was raised in antiquity that has never lost its force. It was called the Argos Logos, the lazy argument. The lazy argument runs as follows: if it is fated that you will recover from your illness, you will recover whether you call the physician or not. If it is fated that you will not recover, no physician will save you. Therefore, it is pointless to call the physician. Therefore, it is pointless to do anything. Fate, on this reading, swallows action, and the wise course is to lie still. Chrysippus rejected this. He rejected it not by softening the doctrine of fate, which he held with full severity, but by distinguishing within the chain of causes between 2 different kinds. There are, he said, perfect and principal causes, and there are auxiliary and proximate causes. The external push that sets a thing in motion is one kind of cause. The internal nature of the thing pushed, which determines how it moves once pushed, is another. And it is in the second kind, in the responsive nature of the thing itself, that the Stoic locates the seat of what we call freedom and what we call responsibility. Here we come to the cylinder. The image is preserved for us by Cicero in his work De Fato, and by Aulus Gellius in the Attic Nights. A cylinder lies upon a sloping board. Someone pushes it. The cylinder rolls. Now, observe. The push is external. Without the push, the cylinder would not roll. But the rolling, the particular manner of the motion, the fact that it turns smoothly along its curved surface rather than tumbling end over end, this belongs to the cylinder itself, to its shape, to what it is. Place a cube on the same slope and give it the same push, and you will see at once that the cube does not roll. It scrapes, it tilts, it falls. The push, Chrysippus said, is what fate provides. The shape is what you are, and the motion that results, the actual unfolding of the event in the world, is the joint product of both. It is thus, he taught, that a man receives his impressions. The impression comes to him from outside, unchosen, like the push upon the cylinder. The world presents him with a sight, a word, a piece of news, a pain. He does not select what impressions arrive, but what he does with the impression, whether he assents to it or withholds his assent, whether he says yes, this is so, and acts upon it, or says no, I will not give my agreement here. This is the rolling. This is the motion that belongs to him. The Stoics gave this faculty a name. They called it synkatathesis, assent, and Chrysippus made it the hinge of the moral life. To understand why he placed the cylinder where he did, you must understand the man and the situation he inherited. He came to Athens, we are told, by Diogenes Laertius from the small town of Soli in Cilicia, on the southern coast of what is now Turkey, sometime in the middle of the 3rd century before our era. He was not a wealthy man. There is a story, perhaps true and perhaps merely fitting, that he had been a long-distance runner before he became a philosopher, and that his property had been confiscated by the royal treasury, which is why he came to Athens with little. He attached himself to Cleanthes, who was then the head of the Stoa, and Cleanthes was by all accounts a slow and patient teacher, a man who had supported himself by drawing water at night so that he could attend lectures during the day. Between Cleanthes, the water drawer, and Chrysippus the runner, there was a temperamental gulf. Cleanthes was devotional in his stoicism, hymn-writing, reverent toward the founder Zeno. Chrysippus was analytical, argumentative, ferocious in his logic, and willing to revise the system wherever he found it wanting. There is a saying preserved from antiquity, attributed sometimes to Chrysippus himself and sometimes to his admirers, which gives you the measure of his confidence. If Chrysippus had not existed, the Stoa would not have existed. This is not modest, but it is, by the lights of antiquity, very nearly true. He wrote, we are told, 705 books. None of them survive entire. We possess him only in fragments, in citations by friendly authors like Plutarch's on Stoic self-contradictions and Cicero's on fate, and in the often hostile summaries of his opponents. When he took up the cylinder then, he was taking up a problem that had been pressed hard upon the Stoa from outside. The academic skeptics, led in his day by Arcesilaus and later by Carneades, had been arguing that the Stoic doctrine of universal causation made human action impossible to evaluate. If the wicked man could not have done otherwise, the skeptic said, why do you punish him? If the virtuous man could not have done otherwise, why do you praise him? You Stoics speak of virtue as the highest good, but on your own account, virtue is simply what the fated cylinder rolls into when pushed in a particular way. You have made morality into geometry. This was the pressure he was answering. and to understand the answer, we must imagine him at it. He lectured in the open air, in the painted colonnade, the Stoa Poikile, from which the school takes its name. The colonnade ran along one side of the Athenian agora. It was a public space. Merchants passed through it. Slaves on errands cut across it. The smell of the fish market reached it on the wind. Chrysippus, by all accounts, lectured there in the ordinary way, sitting or standing among his students, working through arguments by question and answer. He was reputed to be physically slight, with a thin voice, and to gesture sparingly. The cylinder analogy, when he used it, was not stagecraft. It was demonstration in the literal sense. Here is a thing. Here is what it does. Here is what the doing of it shows. He died, Diogenes Laertius tells us, in the 143rd Olympiad, at the age of 73. The cause of death, according to one account, was that he laughed too hard at his own joke about an ass eating figs. According to another, he drank undiluted wine at a banquet and could not recover. Take your pick. What matters is that he taught for nearly 50 years, and that he taught, among many other things, this single image of stone rolling on wood. Now let us see how the principle actually worked for him, not as an abstract proposition, but as a discipline of mind. The Stoic, on Chrysippus's account, is constantly receiving impressions. An impression is what the Greeks called a fantasia, and it is, roughly, whatever the world presents to the mind prior to judgment. You see a man approaching at dusk, and the impression arises: this is an enemy. You hear footsteps behind you on a quiet street, and the impression arises: I am being followed. You receive news of a friend's misfortune, and the impression arises: this is terrible, I cannot bear it. These impressions are the push upon the cylinder. They come from outside, in the sense that you do not generate them by deliberation. They arrive. What Chrysippus insisted, with great precision, is that the impression is not the same as the assent. Between the impression and the action, there is a gap, however small, in which the rational mind has the power to examine what has been presented to it and to decide whether to give its agreement. The Stoic word for this giving of agreement is synkatathesis. It is from this Greek root that we get the Latin assensus, and from that the English assent. It is, Chrysippus held, the only faculty of which we are fully and properly the authors. Everything else about us, our bodies, our possessions, our reputations, even many of our emotions in their first stirrings, comes to us as the push comes to the cylinder. But the assent is the rolling. The assent is what we contribute. Consider how this plays out in a specific case that Chrysippus discusses. A man is insulted in the street. The insult is the impression. It arrives unchosen, like a stone thrown. The cube would tumble. The cylinder would roll. The unphilosophical man, on receiving the impression, assents to it immediately and without inspection. He says, in the silence of his own mind, "Yes, I have been wronged, and this is intolerable, and I must answer." The assent is given so quickly that he experiences it not as an assent at all, but as the impression itself. He believes mistakenly that the insult has made him angry. In fact, his assent to the insult has made him angry. The insult, on its own, is only a sound. The Stoic on Chrysippus's training learns to slow this process down. He learns to notice the gap. He learns that when the impression arrives, he need not, as a reflex, give his assent. He may instead examine the impression and ask whether it is what it appears to be. Is this really an injury? Has anything actually been taken from me? Is the man who spoke even worth the trouble of an answer? In the time it takes to ask these questions, the impression has not gone away, but the assent has not yet been given, and the cylinder has not yet begun to roll. You will recognize perhaps that this is the same teaching that we find later in Epictetus, who learned it from Musonius Rufus, who learned it from the line of Stoic teachers that ran back through Chrysippus. Epictetus puts it in the famous opening of the Enchiridion. Some things are in our power and others are not. Our opinions are in our power, our impulses, our desires, our aversions. Our bodies, our property, our reputation, our offices are not in our power. This is the same teaching as the cylinder. The push is not in our power. The shape and the motion that follows from the shape is. But notice, and this is important, that Chrysippus does not say the shape was chosen. The shape was not chosen. You did not select your own nature. The cylinder did not decide to be a cylinder. It was made one. By what? By the long causal chain that produced it, by the quarry from which the stone was cut, by the mason who shaped it, by the cosmos itself in its providential unfolding. So in what sense, then, is the cylinder responsible for its motion? It is responsible, Chrysippus says, in this sense: the motion is its own. It proceeds from what the cylinder is. Whatever produced the cylinder, once the cylinder exists, the rolling that follows the push is the cylinder's rolling, and not the push's rolling. To attribute the motion entirely to the push is to ignore the cylinder altogether, and to say that the rolling is therefore not free because the cylinder did not choose to be a cylinder is to misunderstand what freedom, on the Stoic account, means. This is the part that requires the most patience. Freedom, for Chrysippus, is not the power to have been otherwise than one is. It is not the power to step outside the chain of causes and insert a wholly new beginning. Such a power, he would say, is a fantasy. It is incoherent, because a choice without any cause is a choice without any reason, and a choice without any reason is not a choice but a twitch. Freedom is rather the unimpeded functioning of one's own nature. The cylinder is free when it rolls as a cylinder rolls, smoothly along its curve, in a manner expressive of its shape. The cylinder is impeded when something stops it, or breaks it, or constrains it from outside its proper motion. The man is free when his actions proceed from his own reason, when he assents on the basis of clear examination, when he is not jerked about by impressions he has not examined. A man who lashes out at every insult is not, on this account, exercising freedom. He is being pushed. The cylinder of his character has been so shaped by habit and by inattention that any push at all sets him rolling in the same predictable direction. The Stoic discipline is the long, slow work of reshaping the cylinder. It is the work of forming, by attention to one's assents, a character that responds to the world's pushes in a manner one would, on reflection, endorse. You cannot escape the pushes. You can become a different cylinder. What, then, is the structural lesson? It is this: there are two errors that men make about the relation between fate and freedom, and Chrysippus stands between them. The first error is to think that because everything is fated, nothing one does matters, and that the wise course is therefore to be passive, to refuse to act, to wait and see what fate brings. This is the lazy argument, and it is incoherent. Your acting and your not acting are themselves part of the chain of causes. If it is fated that you will recover, it may also be fated that you will recover, because you called the physician, and your calling of the physician is no less fated than your recovery. To excuse oneself from action by appeal to fate is to misunderstand what fate is. Fate does not bypass your action. Fate works through your action. The cylinder does not lie still on the slope because the push is fated. The cylinder rolls. The second error is to think that because human beings have something called freedom, they must therefore stand outside the chain of causes, that there must be in them some uncaused power of choice that breaks the order of nature. This too, Chrysippus refused. The freedom he taught is not exemption from causation. It is a particular kind of causation, the kind in which an action proceeds from the agent's own examined assent, rather than from his unexamined reaction to an impression. The free man is not the man without causes. The free man is the man whose causes run through his own reason. Between these two errors is a narrow path, and on that path Chrysippus places the discipline of assent. To walk that path, you must do something that sounds simple and is in fact the work of a lifetime. You must learn to notice your impressions before you assent to them. You must learn to recognize that the rising of an impression is not yet a judgment, and that the judgment, when you make it, is yours. You must accept that the impressions will keep coming, as the world keeps pushing on the cylinder, and that you cannot stop them. You must accept also that your character, the shape of the cylinder, has been formed by causes you did not choose. And you must accept finally that within these acceptances there remains the one thing that is yours, the agreement or the refusal of agreement that you give to each impression as it arrives. This is what the Stoics meant when they said that virtue is sufficient for happiness and that nothing external can take it from you. They did not mean that nothing external can hurt you. Pain is pain. Exile is exile. The death of a child is the death of a child. They meant that the assent by which you take pain to be evil, or exile to be ruin, or the death of a child to be a thing that destroys the meaning of your life, is yours, and that you may withhold it. The impression of pain is given. The judgment that pain is evil is taken. Chrysippus was not a comforter. He did not say that the cylinder's rolling was unimportant, or that fate would arrange things kindly, or that the wise man feels no push. He said that the push is real, and the rolling is real, and that the rolling is the cylinder's own. He said that this is enough. He said that to understand this is to understand what is, in the strict sense, up to us, F. Hemin, and that to live attentively at the point of assent is to live as a rational being and not as a stone. You will notice that this teaching makes no promise about the world. It does not promise that the slope will be gentle, or that the pushes will be light, or that the rolling will bring you to a place you would have chosen. It promises only that, at every point along the slope, the rolling is yours, and the ascent is yours, and the shaping of the cylinder, by attention to its ascents over time, is yours. This is what the third head of the Stoa rolled down a wooden walkway in Athens more than 2,200 years ago to show his students. Sit for a moment with the image. There is a slope. There is a push. There is a stone, shaped by causes you did not authorize, into the cylinder that you are. The world will push. It is pushing now. The impression of this hour, the impression of the words you have just heard, the impression of whatever waits for you when you close this and return to your day. All of these are pushes upon the cylinder. You did not select them. You will not select what comes tomorrow either. But the rolling is yours. The shape that responds to the push is yours. And the work of attending to that shape, of noticing hour by hour and year by year what you assent to and what you let pass without assent, is the work in which a life, on Chrysippus's account, is actually made. Consider then, before you rise from this hour, a question. Where in your own day does the push become the rolling so quickly that you do not see the gap? Where do you assent without examining? It may be in a particular relationship, where an old impression rises and an old assent follows it without your inspection. It may be in your work, where the impression of urgency arrives and the assent of anxiety follows it instantly. It may be in the small reactions of an ordinary morning, when a piece of news arrives and you have judged it before you have read past the first line. The teaching does not require that you change all of this at once. It does not require that you change any of it. It requires only that you begin to see it. The gap between impression and assent is small, and in unattended hours it is invisible, but it is there. Chrysippus believed that the whole of the moral life is built upon learning to find it and to stand in it, and to give one's agreement when one gives it deliberately. The cylinder is on the slope. The push has come. What today will you roll into?